Hello and lovely day to you, gang. My name is Jacob Stanley Butler. Today I will be taking you guys on a technological journey. Today we will be studying the program Premiere Pro. I'll be taking you guys on a tutorial where we'll discuss the general layout of the program, all the panels, all the fancy edits that you can do through the effects controls, talking about the timeline, talking about the different tools that you can use, and the general gist, going from point A to point B, starting the project, going through the creative process of developing the project, and of course, exporting the project to put on all your forms of social media. I will also be talking about some general tips and recommendations that I would make from my own experience. Considering that I am still a newbie to this entire program, definitely give me some tips and tricks that I have not mentioned in this video. I'm trying to make the video as basic as possible while also trying to cover as much content that I can, while also not boring you guys to death. Note to consider, this program tutorial will be going through version 14.6 of Premiere Pro. So if you don't currently have this version, what are you doing? So update, buy, sell a kidney, do what you gotta do. But of course,
stop lollygagging and let's get to work.
So when you first start up the application for Premiere Pro, it will actually give you a list of your most previous projects if you've used the program before. But in this case, you might be a starting user on the platform, so then there won't be anything in this area. Up here, there's going to be advertisements for some of Adobe's latest tutorials, where you can actually hit the start tutorial button for whichever tutorials. However, if this little patch annoys you, we can just go ahead and hide. There we go. But in this specific case, if you are a new user, you're not going to have this list here. So what we can do is we can actually hit new project. This specific dialog box for beginners, such as myself, you don't have to worry about as much because this is more down to the nitty-gritty of changing specific sequence settings. When you go into the program, setting certain rendering settings, display formats for the video and audio and the capture. In this specific sense, and in most cases it sets to pretty good settings, we don't really have to touch any of this. And now it's just a matter of changing the name to the project. In this case, we're just going to go ahead and call it JSB Tutorial. Whoop. Make it nice and simple. And now that that's all set, if we want it to save to a specific folder, we can hit browse. And then in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and go into here. That's fine. You know what? Whatever. I'll figure it out later. Fine. And then when we're all done with that, because we're not going to worry about any of this, we're going to go ahead and hit OK. Here we are. Welcome to Premiere Pro. So if this is your first time seeing the program, chances are this looks very overwhelming. But I assure you that no matter what advanced video editor they're using, all of them are extremely similar in terms of what they offer. The purpose of them being so different is the fact that the layout might look slightly different for certain video editing softwares. I promise you, when I first saw this, I almost gave up, since most of my experience with video editing before Premiere Pro came from Windows Live Movie Maker and Wii Video. But I promise you, it looks a lot more intimidating than it actually is. So for this specific tutorial, we're going to be leaving it in the setup for the effects controls. You can also change the layout when it comes to audio, graphics, and you can go to the Adobe library to pick up some of their templates for audio and video. In this case, for the beginning tutorial, I'm just going to leave it in its preset. You can actually also change the sequence of the panels that you see on the screen. If you don't want this panel here, you can go and pick it up and you can place it somewhere else. All you have to do, if you do end up losing your space for it, is just pick the marker in the little tiny 3D square here that you'd like to replace it again, and then it'll do it. And it's great. It's so great. It's awesome. I'm so excited. So now it's a matter of getting familiarized with the general setup. So the general setup is broken up into 4 panels. These 4 panels are the project panel, the program panel, the timeline panel, and the source panel. The source panel also is shared by a couple of other panels such as effects controls and audio clip. You can also add other panels to this section. For the basic preset, you're probably most likely going to be using effects controls the most, because this is where you can affect your clips the most frequently and the most drastically and the most transitionistly. The first plate that we're going to actually be starting is in the project panel. So to add clips to eventually the timeline, you can either double click inside this box that says import media to start, or you can just drag in a media file from a folder. I would personally recommend dragging in a media folder, just because you'll know exactly what location it's coming from and you don't have to go data digging inside all your files. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to pull out this folder that I have deep within my archives that's called example content. I will be taking this directly from some clips that me and my friends got together. And that's right, I have friends. And then it's going to bring up this
Are you sure about that?
When importing it over, it will have that small dialog box that says importing files, and then hooray! We now have files inside our project panel. We can double click and we can preview each of the clips. If you leave these clips in your downloads folder, when you go to clear your downloads folder later, this will be the only home for them, and they will get corrupted and they will have this really ugly red square. And of course, we don't want that. So what we're going to do is just pull it in straight from the folder, just like we did. The program panel just simulates what's currently taking place in the timeline and where your cursor is. The timeline is where all the clips will be placed in sequence. The source panel is what you currently see when you double click one of the clips inside your project panel. But in this case, the timeline is where we're going to be spending most of our time. Now that our media is ready, it's time for our timeline to get Stone Cold Steve Austin into submission. With the first clip that you want to be placed into the timeline, all you have to do is click and hold, drag and place. Click and hold, drag and place. This first clip that you place into the video is going to optimize what your timeline is set to in terms of the frame rate, the quality, and general settings that keep the timeline in place. Now the clips seem a little small. If you do want to extend the time frame that this is based on, there's this small little bar down here that you can actually squeeze and it'll make it longer. If you want to make it shorter, you can go ahead and pull it out. And so this timeline is broken into two parts. There's the video-based tracks and there is an audio-based tracks. At the very bottom of the audio-based tracks, there's also the master track. The same scroll wheels that you see on the bottom here are also available on the side to be able to change the sizing of each of the tracks. With the audio tracks, there's actually a lot more options that you have for it. Some of the options include that you can mute the tracks, you can keep it as a solo track, and you can actually record commentary over the video that's taking place. And for all the tracks that are available within the timeline, you can lock them. These little light up squares on the end set the source patching to whenever you copy and paste a clip into the timeline, so that way this will be the source of where the clips end up going. So it doesn't accidentally overwrite any of the clips that are already set in place, because that is a pain in the tush. You can actually add more tracks as well if you were to right click one of the tracks and hit add track in this small dialog box. Yay, it's right up there, see it? Whoa. Sometimes it can get a little tricky to place a track before the first track. So all you have to do is right click and hit add tracks, plural. English. It will give you an option to add a certain amount of video or audio tracks, and you can place the positioning. So if you want it before the first track, you just hit this button here. In the beginnings to video editing, your videos might look just more like this, where it's on a single set of tracks. As you go on, it will look more like this. I'm barely at that stage anyway, so don't worry about it. Now that we have a general understanding of the timeline, let's scoot over a tiny bit and head over to the toolbar. The toolbar is a quick access set of tools that you can use to adjust your timeline. For the case of showing off the toolbar, I'm just going to stick a couple more clips in here. Now that I've kind of set up the timeline a little bit, we can show off some of these tools. The tools that we have displayed here to start are the selection tool, the track select tool, the ripple edit tool, the razor tool, the slip tool, the pen tool, the hand tool, and the type tool. And here's the quick version. The selection tool lets you grab and move media. Track select lets you grab everything in front and move it forward or backward. Ripple edit closes gaps by stretching and trimming them. Razor snips clips. The slip tool lets you see the beginning and end frames of the videos in front and behind. The pen tool allows you to adjust keyframes on clips. The hand tool adjusts your view. And the type tool adds text. Whew! Nice. We did it. Good work, gang. And all these tools share the goal of being able to adjust more to the timeline and having quick access to these tools right next to it. But sometimes users want more, which is why we're going to head over to the effects controls. Now, whenever you double click one of these clips inside your project panel, it will automatically pop up within your source panel, which is also where the effects controls are located. Everything I talked about earlier. You know, go back. Yeah. You can further access these effects controls if you go ahead and click on the effects controls here. Sometimes, however, you will not be able to see it because it will look something like this. Where'd the audio clip go? What's going on? Why can't I see my stuff? This is annoying. I closed the effects controls. Reset this. Oh! Oh! Alright. right, gang, so awkward. I didn't know how to replace panels, but the way that I'm aware right now is that you can go ahead and go back up to the top bar to the panel presets where we were talking about earlier and hit these 3 little bars, and you can reset to the saved layout. And I was using the saved layout, so that's fine. The good news is it's here, it's great, and now we can keep on going. So sorry. You're gonna find when you start to use these little nitty-bitty edits, the timeline and the effects controls are gonna go hand in hand. After your timeline has been assembled, you're gonna be able to head over to the effects controls to let your creativity run free. When this panel is selected, there's going to be a list of options that you can choose from, all varying from motion, which includes position and scale, rotation, the anchor point, the anti-flicker filter, opacity, time remapping, and volume. Elements of motion allow you to reposition where the clip is placed on the screen. You'll be able to see these changes from the program panel. If you ever need to go back, of course, Control-C. The left numbers are the x-axis, the right number is the y-axis. You know, simple math. Then there's, of course, there's scaling, which is how you can adjust the zoom on the video. The rotation, which sets the angle of which the video will be set at. The anchor point, which actually sets the point of which rotation will initially take place. An anti-flicker filter is the one that's probably used the least, but for some clips, there'll be these little tiny white edges that kind of fill up on the side. So if you do want to get rid of that, you can go ahead and increase this to whichever interval will make these fuzzies go away while not adding too much. Opacity is the level of visibility the clip has inside your timeline. So if you ever wanted to make an object fade away, it can. For this bit, I went and grabbed hydration. Hydration is important, people. Okay, so wait, let me reiterate that opacity is not meant to just fade objects, but it also sets good fades for transitions. And then down here is the main leveling system for audio. It's automatically set to be animated, and we'll talk about animations in just a second. But if you wanted to set the audio just to one basic level, you can go and hit this clock icon to toggle the animation. And then you can go ahead and adjust the audio level. And the best part is that you can add even more of these kinds of effects to your video and audio clips directly from the effects panel over here as well. Doing an in-depth editing tutorial involving all of these tricks would literally take
one eternity later.
Their presets of all of these different types of presets that are provided by Adobe. Not only that, but their settings to mess with the video, to be able to adjust color, also to distort, such as adding this amazing turbulent displace and making our lovely friends do some nice wave warping. But if you think about it, think it's too goofy for the mood of the video that you're trying to display, you can actually get rid of any of these effects by right-clicking the effect inside the effect controls panel and hitting clear. And it's gone, everything's good and again, yay. But the beauty of learning, and I don't want to take that away, and I also don't want to spend an absurd amount of time on this tutorial just to give you guys the time to try it on your own. The beauty of it is that you'll be able to learn and explore all these features as time goes on and use the program more and more, which is exactly what I've been doing. So let's just approach the basics. So a couple of minutes ago, we had discussed keyframes. Keyframes are these small little squares that pop up when you toggle an animation for a set video. I will be demonstrating the basics of keyframes with motion, because it's honestly the easiest one to work with. When you activate any of these clocks on any of these effects over here, it'll automatically set through your first keyframe. You can kind of see over here, I'll drag it over. There we go. And you'll see the timing within the clip of which the keyframe will meet up to its peak potential, we'll call it for now. There might be another term, but I want to call it peak potential because it's fancy. For the sake of this, I'll start by scaling the video clip with the same animation down to 50. Now with this in mind, we could go ahead and take the marker and place it into a new spot later on into the clip. And what we'll do is we'll hit this keyframe marker next to the effects controls that we're working with and add new keyframes. In this case, I'm going to set the scaling back to its original size. And the effect that we're left with is this. Now, in this case, and depending on the project that you're working on, this effect may not be appropriate unless you're making, like, I don't know, a a meme. But if you're actually working with legitimate projects, the motion is sometimes hard to incorporate unless you're trying to make fancy and unorthodox transitions. And of course, make sure before you adjust any of these settings that you have it on the keyframe and timing that you'd like to set it to by hitting this little caret option here. And it'll return it to that keyframe. Because if you don't, it will get really weird. That was actually really funny. As I mentioned before, you can add even more edits by heading over to the effects panel and selecting every single edit and placing it onto the video. But don't. Because if you do, the video will end up looking like this. Because we don't ideally want that, we're going to go ahead and pick one. Just one. And in this case, we're going to use twirl. Hey, that's me! Look at that lovely grin. Look at that wonderful smile. Look at that charismatic characterism that's being displayed by the shininess of that lovely camera that my friend let me borrow. Let's ruin it. So over at the effects panel, we're going to be carrying over the twirl option. And then it's going to pop up in the effects control panel. And then we are going to go ahead and place some amount of twirl on it. Oh, yes. Look at me go. So now let's go ahead and place the keyframe right at the beginning and just see what that looks like. God, I look like one of those creatures from Spy Kids. But if I want to add a little bit of animation to it and perhaps change the positioning, all I have to do is just affect these controls here. So in this case, the angling changes how deep the twirl radius is. Like leave it like nice and subtle. Oh yeah. So let's go ahead and adjust that again. In the twirl center, we can change the positioning where the twirl is at. So let's go ahead and add a little bit of animation to it, make it look nice and goofy. And so what we're going to do is, as always, go ahead and animate all three of these options under the twirl option. And we're going to go ahead and carry the marker over towards the end. Once we are at the end, we're going to go ahead and insert new keyframes. Once those keyframes are selected, we can go ahead and mess up what we had before. And now I look like Sid the Sloth.
Well, don't that
Go
put
ahead
the
and change the positioning so that way maybe I kind of like squeeze down here a little bit. Lovely. And then change the twirl so that way I don't know, I'll end like that. Perfect. Let's see how it turned out. Guys, we animated a twirl. First we did the motion, now we did the twirl. Look at us go! So as you can see, the surroundings of the video were also twirled as well. And if you perhaps don't like how that looks, you can actually place what is called a mask over the video. So if we go ahead and select the video track in the video, it'll bring up the effects controls and we'll head down to twirl. If we go ahead and hit under twirl, this pen tool, we can actually trace around my face, and that automatically brings up what is called mask 1. Now, mask 1 needs to be created. So we use this nifty pen tool, and we slowly go around my face. And now we have the twirl effect specifically placed in that area. Now, it looks a little choppy around the edges, so we can actually go ahead and feather that mask so that way it fades out slightly. Now, it looks a little morphed because the twirl tool, you know, is a little glitchy. But it still looks funny, ready? Actually, really pretty. Anyway, you could also change the expansion of which the mask goes out to, and then that basically just changes it back to square one. But if you don't like how big the mask was initially, you can actually change the positioning on this to get rid of the underface that was created in the process. If you want the mask to actually be animated and track to a specific spot, which is motion tracking, you can actually hit this play button right here and it'll automatically track to the positioning based on what it thinks that you want. Let's see how it did. It actually didn't do that bad. It was able to track to my specific face positioning, and honestly, we couldn't see my undermouth anymore, which is pretty good. Mostly what people do with this setting is they'll place a black bar, perhaps over somebody's face when they're swearing, or they'll blur out their face on some kind of reality TV show where they didn't permit that they wanted to be shown on the show, things like that. And there's a lot of keyframes here. This entire bar is all keyframes now, which is weird. Also, real quick, if you like to actually do the motion tracking manually, we're not going to use an effect this time, But if you'd like to use the motion tracking that we just used manually, you can actually do it yourself. So if we place the marker right at the beginning here, go ahead and activate the animation on position and scale, and then set the starting position, we can actually track my face's movement. So what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and select motion. This is going to select the entire video panel. So now, if we go ahead and select back in this little area where the keyframes are, and press forward slightly, we can change the positioning, and it'll make a new keyframe every single time. I like to do it every 2 frames because it makes it look a little smoother so it's not so jumpy and choppy. But sometimes for the humor, this makes it better. Alright, and so that's kind of what it looks like. There were some moments when I reached the peak of my nod where I wouldn't really do anything, so I just left that blank and continued to skip a couple more frames. But now that we have that set in place, let's see what the motion track looks like. It definitely looks a little bit goofy. That was kind of the vibe I was going for, but of course you can use this to adapt a little bit more motion tracking techniques that may be a little bit more professional when it comes to placing labels on individuals, when it comes to blurring out people's faces, I mentioned before. This specific case and at the level I'm at, I just like to do it kind of for fun, you know? But of course, if you're new to the program and you're not really familiar with it, this might be a little bit tricky at first. I know it was for me. I'm still a beginner and I'm not a pro, so I don't really know it as well. So now we're going to cruise through some of the other clips that we have sitting here. We have some of our friends, of course. I've drawn them. They're amazing. Wait, what the heck? What the heck? What is all this? What the heck is going on here? Well, of course, we're not going to have the entire 5-minute clip sitting here because that's not the tone we set in the beginning clips where these are a lot smaller. We're not going to just have a 5-minute clip of us setting up a drone. So what we're going to do instead is we're actually going to delete this forever, and then immediately look at it again. So if we don't want the entire thing, we can actually hit specific parts of it. So in this case, what I'll do is I'll actually hit I on my keyboard and O on my keyboard. And that will select a specific segment of said video. So instead, you get a smaller segment like this. We can also utilize some of our tools here to go ahead and shorten some of the clips so that way they're not looking as bulky. I'll get rid of this back end where we kind of lose the camera a bit. And if you click inside the black here, right click and hit ripple delete, you can also get rid of the space that way as well, or use the ripple edit tool. Now, as we can see, the clip is looking a lot better in terms of the pacing of each of the clips. They're pretty similar in terms of them being able to phase together. We went and fixed the longer clip on the very end, so that way it was just one specific segment. But now that the timeline is trimmed, connected, edited, and is in its development stages, you may want to consider transitions, especially if you're looking to add a little extra emotion to your video. Transitions can set the speed and tone of the introduction, set jumps from each clip, and set a conclusion within the video as well. To set transitions, we are once again going to go back to the effects panel on the right side of the screen, and we are going to open the folder that says Video Transitions. Under here, there's a lot of different options that you can choose from, some of them a little bit more interactive and spunky than others. But for the sake of this video, we will select one, and that will be the simple dissolve transition. The dissolve transition in this case looks a lot more like a dip to black where it kind of fades in, but if you were to place this in between 2 clips, it looks more like this. This sets a really nice transition between some of the clips to allow you to be able to see this nice phase, and now the tone that's been set is a lot more smooth and calm. So the transitions were able to smoothen out the in-betweens of each clip. In other video projects, these are intended to make the scene a little bit more dramatic. In this case, I was kind of just messing around with it, so it made it look a little bit more goofy. If you want to set a different duration on any of the transitions, you can either drag the end of the transition, select the transition, and go to Effects Controls, and adjust the positioning from there, or of course leave it as a B if you do enjoy the timing. And let it be known that there's plenty more edit combinations that you can go into beyond what I've shown today. Just for the sake of the timing of the video, I just want to show a couple more of the simpler ones that are easy to adjust. So have fun with it, explore, you know, enjoy it. But before we finish up today, of course we gotta export it, so we're gonna take this interesting creation and bring it to the exporting stage. The video project is looking pretty good, but the playback does look a little choppy. To get rid of this, we have to go ahead and render the clips. Rendering basically increases the quality of the playback by taking each frame and cleaning them up. What we can do to render is take the little scroll bar and go to the end, place our marker on the very back, and go ahead and hit O, just like we did in the source panel to select a certain part of the clip that we did with this clip right here. Regardless of the video length, it will select everything from the back end to the beginning as long as you just hit O. Now that it is selected, we're going to go ahead and go up into the Sequence tab and select Render In and Out. Or we can select Render Selection, considering we have selected everything that's considered within the video. Wow, things are looking pretty good. Now, as you can see, that did take a little bit of time just to clean up 28 seconds of footage. As you can imagine, it will take much longer the longer the video gets and the more that you're rendering. So make sure you try to do this in groupings as you're working on the project, because honestly, it doesn't matter when you're doing this. However, when you add more edits into the effects controls panel, it will cause the rendering length to take a longer amount of time, and it will make the line up here change its color. Green means the playback is good, yellow means that it's getting a little choppy, and red means,
Oh no.
good job, okay, we're almost there, gang.
Great, we're almost there.
Now it's time to show this beauty to the world, am I right? Let's go ahead and export. At last, it is time to export, so let's go ahead and go up to the File tab, and we will select Export at the bottom, and here we are going to select Media. Now we have this new dialog box that gives us a synopsis and a summary of everything that we've done in the project in terms of formatting and everything that it will do in order to export your project. For the sake of this video, you're most likely not going to be touching really anything except for the name. So the output name you're going to want to change because it's going to be really hard to find otherwise. So you're going to go ahead and select this. It'll bring you into your Files Explorer and find a spot for you. I'm going to go ahead and find a spot for it real quick. So I went ahead and I placed it inside the tutorial folder for today's video. So I'm going to go ahead and call it Tutorial Fun with Friends. And once you saved it with the new name, you can go ahead and hit save. And it'll change the name up here. And it already set the location, so now it's just a matter of exporting. These other options down here can be further explored if you'd like to change the height and width of the video, some of the frame rate, the maximum depth of rendering, certain specific and very intricate changes that you want to make to the video editing itself. But again, if you're a beginner, you don't have to worry about this as much. So now, it's time to export.
Oh my God! Okay, it's happening. Everybody stay calm. What's the procedure, everyone?
Depending on the length of the video, the encoding and the exporting stage can take a pretty lengthy amount of time. So go outside, play Batman, call your friend to say hi, or think about the lingering inevitability of death and how there is an ever-existing timer dwelling over all of our lifeless skulls. And the project has been exported! And that's basically the general gist of editing in Premiere Pro. Not that bad, right? It's okay. Hey, it's okay, don't cry. Why are you crying? What are you doing? Taking each of these pieces, breaking them down, taking it step by step, and working through it. Learning it over time. That's what it's all about, man! You'll be able to spend more time understanding the panels, being able to understand zooms, working with motion tracking, being able to work with color, effects, settings, transitions, whatever it may be, you got time. And if you truly enjoy it, that's the best part of video editing, because you get to learn that over time, and you get to reward yourself with the knowledge and the understanding that you so deserve. Treat yourself! Before we close things out today, I want to give 3 kind of generalized tips when working with the program that you should remain aware of when you're starting to search around, further understand the platform, and overall learn more about video editing as a whole. First thing is keeping your media organized. This is one of the biggest issues when it comes to first-time video editing, and when people such as myself don't take the time to organize their media. What I found myself in the habit of doing is just pulling files straight from my downloads. If you do this and you delete the file from its original home to make more space, it will corrupt inside your video, and whatever work you put into it will mean absolutely nothing to the program. So do it! The second thing that I want to mention is it's also important to communicate with Adobe. These types of applications are bound to break because people bring it to its absolute limits and then it crashes down. And they also offer templates to both video and audio, and they also offer tutorials if you need any additional help that I did not cover here today. which is very possible. And the third most important lesson, if you do not utilize this lesson and this tip, you will be a guaranteed failure in what you do. You will suck. You won't be great. You'll never succeed. You'll never get a job, and you will never make out to be the individual that you've always wanted to be. The third step, trick, whatever you want to call it, is have fun with it. Damn it! I didn't mean what I said. I'm sorry. No, but for reals though, it's all about having fun with the platform. Explore. Figure out what options you have. Take a hike. Edit it. Go to the park. Edit it. Whatever it is. If you're having fun making it, edit it. And that, of course, brings us to the end of the Premiere Pro experience. If you could please remove your VR goggles and place it to the bin to your left, it would be much appreciated. Thank you so much for stopping by the tutorial today, gang. If I mentioned anything that was good in the video, make sure to leave it in the comments. If I mentioned anything bad or neglected to mention anything, let me know in the comments. If you want me to do further coverage on the program or any other Adobe products, make sure to let me know, because I would love to try. I'm still learning, because I really only know Premiere Pro, Illustrator, and Photoshop. So we'll see how it goes. This video is actually connected to a trilogy. So if you're interested in seeing more connected content, I also have a video on how to build your brand on YouTube, and I also have a video on developing the online mindset when going on social media or any online platforms. So if you're interested in any of those related pieces of content, make sure to go to my channel, check it out. And if you enjoyed this content, maybe consider subscribing. That would be pretty cool. Or maybe even just liking the video. That's fine. Or just even being here, because I love you. You're great. Thank you. But stay classy, stay lovely, and I love you all.